I want to thank the Voices of Women podcast for allowing us to have a place where we can come out and speak about our businesses and even about how business intertwines with the personal. Before selling my previous company, my business partner and I moved all our assets that we didn't sell into a holding company. We call that company Tandy. That company consisted of investments that we made in other growing companies, and we also purchased stocks. Other holdings included an app that we built when we were thinking of launching an app for our business, workshops that we delivered since 2002, and our publishing division. After COVID happened, I formed Sandy Webster LLC to take all the in-person workshops that we created and turn them into courses for business owners. My first course is how to form an advisory board. And most business owners never thought about getting the extra help that they need for their business, and they never think about it in terms of forming an advisory board to get that free help. And they don't know how to manage the board meetings, so sometimes they just never participate in that. I give them that information. If they need help, my brand, Sandy Webster Coachsulting, will guide them through the process of forming an advisory board. Even so, when owners still don't have the time to do it, I will help them. They can bring me in to completely run their board for them, interview the candidates for their board, and help them throughout the year with their board meetings. As a child, I did not have a say in whether or not I immigrated to the US. I just simply followed what my parents told me. They brought us to the US, and that's what I knew. My mom had the opportunity to work for a family in Chicago through the Catholic Charities, I think it was, and they sponsored her. So the pay was much better than the one that she was getting, and she was excited about traveling to the US and having her children go to school in the US. And that's how I came to the US as a child. I was about 10 years old. I think I just turned 10. And that became my life. I've been here ever since. There was a teasing about my accent because I was a 10-year-old child in school, and that's what kids do. But there was also harsher teasing from children who told me to go back to my country on the banana boat. And of course, I think they heard that from their parents, and I never held it against them because sooner or later I became the one that was teasing as well. And I understood that not every immigrant who comes to this country is taking somebody else's job, because that's a lot of what they used to say, right? Your mom is taking my job, or your family is taking your job. But I understood that even though they didn't want to do these menial jobs, the Americans, they still resented immigrants for it. And even Black Americans would tell me that, my mom's taking my mom's job and they don't have to work. And there was nothing like that. They just resented that we worked hard, that we wanted to own a home, and we were willing to save, and we were willing to give up certain things, to sacrifice in order to have that. I remember one friend who came to my house asked if we were selling drugs, because how could we be able to afford this house? And it wasn't a big house, it was just a small house. But how could we afford it on my mom's salary? And not knowing that she was a master saver. And because of my mom, today, I'm also a master saver. But I learned a lot from those people that resented me or my family for being in the US. Equal opportunity is so complex. It depends on the perspective on which you're looking. I don't think there's any equal opportunity in education overall, but by the time education mattered to me, I was a legal resident, a citizen, so I was afforded the same educational opportunities as other Americans. I dare to say that sometimes I had favor in terms of being able to get scholarships from immigrant groups like the Caribbean associations, or I would take advantage of affirmative action edicts that were in schools at the time. And those systems were in place by the time I came of age to take advantage of them. I totally understood why they were in place because I was not equal to white people and I had less credentials. And even the white people with less credentials than myself were not equal to me. They were still above me. And so that affirmative action was put into place to kind of equalize the playing field. I'm not sure if it equalized it or not, but we definitely started to see a little bit more advantages. When you say equal opportunities from a color perspective, meaning black or white, there's no equality when it comes to color. Because for color, they see you coming, right? So whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, color is the first thing that's seen. And a judgment is passed before you even open your mouth. So I know I'm starting from a deficit standpoint, from a disadvantage. And for people with definite African American names, or ethnic names, I should say, you don't even have to see them, right? As soon as you see their names, they've not even met you yet, but if it's on a resume, they start thinking about what ethnicity you are. There are not a lot of white Shaniquas, I have to say that. So there's no less judgment today than there was when I was younger in school or in the corporate world. The judgment is simply unspoken. And Asian immigrants were clearly favored in a time in corporate America over African immigrants, regardless of the country that they came from. I think corporations felt that they could meet the equal opportunity quota by utilizing a minority group that was not African American, but it afforded corporations to be diverse without having Black people in particular key positions. In the job market in the 80s, people of color, which is when I started to really work, people of color were definitely kept to non-managerial positions. Every Black person in the company was a security guard. They worked in the cafeteria, they worked in food services, the mailroom, and the highest you could get in the 80s was a secretary, which I know because I was one in the 80s. You were making great money if you were the assistant to a vice president. So I took a secretarial job because it was making more money than my analyst job. And that was a mistake, as I started at the bottom of the corporate ladder, and it took me a much longer time to get there. I have to say, I didn't skip a single rung on that ladder. And even after I went back to school and I got different levels of education, an MBA, a doctorate, there are people who to this day refer to me as JP Secretary. JP is the guy that I used to be my boss in that corporation. And I don't keep those people in my sphere of influence because they're very narrow-minded and they're not open to change. Imagine you're still using something I did in, I would say, 1981, 82, and you're still thinking of me in that light today. And I find that happens with immigrants. So if you were a janitor and someone knew you as a janitor, you'll forever stay in their minds as a janitor. We're not given that mental promotion that comes with the job, right? So that's what I feel regarding equality in America. My first job in America was what you would call a Shabbat goy, and that's Jewish for someone who did all the jobs that the Jewish people couldn't do on the weekends, especially on Saturday, because they couldn't turn the lights on. You know, my neighbors would call me to turn on the lights. That's on Saturday, and they'd give me $1 for turning on the lights. And I totally exploited that, I have to say. I totally exploited that. When I was a babysitter, and that grew into the thing that taught me the most was having a daycare. And it showed me that I could start a business and run a business no matter how old I was. I was always an entrepreneur. I don't think any one specific thing triggered the fact that I became an entrepreneur. I've been thinking of ways to make money since I can remember. What really triggered the spirit is my need to have my own money. I didn't want to wait for an allowance. I didn't want to worry about my mom about giving me money. She would work, and if she had a couple of dollars, then that would be my allowance. And I didn't want that. I really wanted to make my own money, and it's a matter of control. I didn't call it control at the time, but I wanted to control how my cash was flowing. And on top of that, my grandmother sincerely believed in women making their own money and controlling their destiny. I think that's where I got a lot of it from. She always said you had to learn to turn your hand, which is a Jamaican term for you have to learn how to do things with your hands, because she really felt if you could do things with your hands, you would always have a job. And that's what she wanted, for you to always be able to, if you lose one job, you can run and get another job. And I'm afraid that rubbed off on me quite a bit. I always feel like I'm in charge of my destiny when I have a business. And if there are no sales, it's because I didn't sell. And if I made money, it's because of the decisions that I made to make money. And I only have myself to blame if something goes wrong or if something goes right. So that's how I started in entrepreneurship. And I've continued that. Even when I worked in the corporate world, I still had that entrepreneurial knack. And I worked in divisions of corporations where it was very entrepreneurial. So new business products, launching new departments, launching new divisions. That's where I felt comfortable doing brand new things. And even in my business, that's what I specialized in, doing new projects, new products, getting it out there to the market. And I kept at that, and I'm still good at that. So I'm launching a new program because I'm still good at anything new. Yes, it is difficult for people of color, particularly women, to find investors in the world. My business partner and I started our first business with $2,000. That's what it was. That's what it took to buy 2 new computers, because at the time, all we needed were 2 computers to start our business. It was built on technology, and it was built on the knowledge that we had. So we didn't need a lot of upfront money. Today, when a new business starts, there's so much technology involved that very little of that technology is free. You can get it free, but you'll be trading up and getting the pro version of something because it doesn't do exactly what you want. You usually have to go to a paying version to get all the features you need. Therefore, starting up a new business, Sandy Webster LLC, I've already put out thousands of dollars of my own money into this venture, all in technology. And it's well spent. It will pay it back. But I know people who spend way, way more than that because they go overboard and they get things because they know they'll need them in the future. But don't get it if you don't need it now. New business today just take a lot of technology to get to market quickly, and you also need things to monitor your business and to sustain your business. So that's where your big investment should go. And when I started my company, I knew that people of color, particularly women, I'm going to stick to women, particularly women, started as experts. They start from what they know, what they did in the corporate world, how they utilize that to transition into a business. And the cost is usually pretty low. We start in areas where the startup cost is pretty low. It takes us a little longer to get up and running, and it takes us longer to scale because we started at first base. We started from scratch. A lot of people start in the middle, or they might buy an existing business, but we tend to start from scratch because we don't have the money to buy that new business. And then when we grow to about, I would say, $100,000, we think, hey, we've made it. That's great. We're making six figures. But you're not really taking home six figures. You're making 100,000, but a lot of that goes into paying your employees, paying your vendors, and then there's nothing left for you if you're in a city as expensive as New York City, because New York City just takes a lot to live here. If you're living in somewhere in the South, it might be a little bit easier. But living in New York City, I have to say, you have to make more in order just to sustain your everyday life. And as a business owner, you've got to watch that bottom line to ensure that you're paying yourself. Once I know that, once I have a number that I'm trying to grow my business to X dollar amount, it could be 50,000, because 50,000 will cover my business expenses and my living expenses. I'm just using that number. But if I know a number that I'm moving towards, so there are a lot of business plan templates online. You can just choose one. I may have already mentioned that having an advisory board is also critical. I find that to be extraordinarily helpful, to have a board of mentors and a board of experts who usually can get as volunteers. Maybe they've retired their businesses, and they can come in and help you with the expertise that you don't have, that you're lacking in your business. So that's why my first course is how to form an advisory board, because I think every business owner should know how to do that. I also utilize what we call a test and learn approach in my business. Will always be at the latest and greatest that you have right now. I constantly test new products. I test new services to see what people like or don't like. I want to keep it fresh. And it also gives me the data to know what works and what doesn't work in my company. And to me, that's important. And I prefer goals rather than resolutions. I know it's a time of year where everyone's making resolutions, but having goals put in front of you, write them down, put them on a big vision board. I love to use my vision board. Put them down. And if it's not too late or too much trouble, take a look at them monthly. I try to look at them at least quarterly and check in against my goals to see if they're attainable. I find having that is really important in my business, and I can keep my goals right in front of me all the time. If I do it on a vision board, then it's on my wall or in my living room, where as soon as I walk in, I can see it. And also the entire world can see that you have goals, and they'll help you towards it. Some of the goals people help me with are traveling. If I want to travel and I put it up on my board, they come in, they're like, oh, I want to go to Morocco, or I want to go to India. And we'll form little groups to do that. The other thing I think is you cannot stick to ideas that are outdated. The ideas and products that you had 10 years ago, you saw what COVID did. People had to turn to making masks. They had to put the machinery they had into doing other things really, really quickly. So if you're flexible, if you're inflexible, and I've seen the people who are inflexible, they're out of business right now. The economy caught them off guard. They were not prepared. They didn't have the technology. You can look at the churches that are happening. And the final thing I would say that's also extremely important is to have happy employees, or have the people who are working with you, because you cannot scale a business without them. So thank them whenever you see them, appreciate them, give them little thank you things. It could be a chocolate bar. Sometimes I used to just pass and throw a chocolate bar on someone's desk. Say, here, thanks, here's something for your day. But appreciate the employees that you have. My advice to immigrant women who are trying to establish themselves in their career or in entrepreneurship, to get help in a structured manner where they can sit down with you on a regular basis. Single women in corporate America needs their own mentors, or when you put all your mentors together, you're getting your board. And I think everyone should have that. It should be one of the first things you do in your business. And I see this a lot where not just women, but we're talking about women right now, but women bring the way that they did business in another country to the US. And they cannot understand, why doesn't this work here? So for example, in some countries, there's nothing wrong with paying to play. And paying to play, I mean, you're going to pay someone off so that they can bring your shipping stuff, you have stuff on the docks, and you're going to pay someone to get that and to make your stuff come into the country. Well, in the US, that's called a bribe, and it's a jailable offense. You can go to jail for that. You can't just pick up a habit that you had in another country and not check the rules of the country you're now in. And immigrant women also tend to stay within their communities. I think I mentioned that before as well. But in order to learn, for example, if you have a restaurant that is serving ethnic cuisine, the bulk of your customers are going to be from that ethnic origin. Typically someone from the same culture, right? They need to spend time, they meaning immigrant women need to spend time investigating what other cultures are doing in a similar business so they can apply any efficiencies or any technology that's happening to their own business. One of the messages that I would like to convey to the Voice of Women podcast listeners is, because we don't always get heard in the larger forums when men are present, I want to thank the Voices of Women podcast for allowing us to have a place where we can come out and speak about our businesses, and even about how business intertwines with the personal. Particularly for women of color, we get the opportunity to have a voice on this podcast, to share our views and our feelings. The immigrant experience is a part of who I am. That strong work ethic that we possess enables us to push through the corporate world, or to keep our businesses going all the time. I say that. And we're raising the next generation of Americans. That's so exciting to think about. We are raising the next generation of Americans who will present challenges to the way of life known by immigrant parents while they're operating in the US. And I experienced that because I get pushback all the time on why do you do this? Why do you do that? Or they don't understand the background of where things come from. But I understand fully well the selfless actions that my mom took for us. She worked several jobs at a time, all the time, like her entire life. She worked several jobs, but she wanted to ensure that we had a roof over our heads, that we had food, that we had a great education, and all those things came to fruition. I'm more selfish than she is compared to where she was at that time, or compared to white women. I think I'm not that high on the selfish scale if you're comparing me to white women. But compared to my mom, yes, I'm a little bit more selfish. I want time for myself to do things. And we deserve that. We've worked really hard to get that. We as women are the essential workers in this country. And we see that now in COVID. That puts us on the front line. It puts us in harm's way when there's any kind of viral outbreak that is happening. We work in the hospitals, in food service, like restaurants and cafeterias, and we work in the transportation system. And whether as an entrepreneur supplying them or as a worker online in those industries, we're always in harm's way. So we either have to learn, I joke about it, that we have to get our children to be in professions and careers that are more technologically oriented and therefore not as much in harm's way. I'm not saying that the nurses aren't helpful because we can't live without them, but we've been decimated. A lot of our women died during COVID because they're on the front line. I think immigrant women have to work in the US and still support their families in other countries. Men do that, but women take it much more personally. I see my mom used to send money, clothes, and food back to Jamaica because a lot of people there were not working and were not doing as well. And for her, that was part of who she was. This is why you came to America, to work hard, and to help the people who are back home. They work even harder to legally bring their families to the US because women are out there working several jobs like my mom did so that their families could join them. And I know men do that too, but I just know from the female experience that family is so important and we'll do anything to make sure we're together. So kudos to those of us who are keeping our heads up during this difficult period in our history. We're educating our children from home right now. The elderly is still being fed. And we're still learning each day what needs to be done to keep our businesses going and just to even make our businesses larger, which might seem impossible, but I say that you can do this.